So welcome to The Future is Now. Originally, we rolled this series out in 3 parts. We had done Unstuck in Time, Thriving, Not Surviving, and A Day in the Life. We're going to do the entire series today, but we're going to stop in between the sections to answer any questions. So if you do have questions, you can put them in the chat box, or we're dealing with a small enough group that you can unmute and go ahead and ask, but we will pause and let you know. So for all of you sci-fi enthusiasts or those just remembering high school days, the Unstuck in Time is a reference to Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. The main character in that book is Billy Pilgrim, and he goes to sleep a senile widower, and then he wakes up on his wedding day. And that's what 2020 and the past year has felt like, even into 2021. So maybe it's the reverse of that, but hopefully we're not abducted by aliens. If so, those aliens in that book were called Trifalmadorians, and their advice is so apropos to today. What has happened, and what is going to happen will, so it goes. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Rhea. We've got Bridget and Katie with us as well. Bridget is really the workplace expert at CBRE and directs our local project management group. Then we have Katie Wenger, who is an associate in advisory and transactions, and she really has her finger on the pulse of all things Gen Z. Bridget, I'll kick it to you.
All right, awesome. So thanks everyone again for being here. So kind of the goal of tonight, as Rhea said, is to really just help you guys think through some strategies and ideas to help set the bar for what it's going to take going forward to really help foster a culture that's relevant to the new normal, and really helping to attract and retain talent, and really how to occupy space more efficiently moving forward. So we were going to first focus on the current environment, and let's get started.
That's great. So last year, in the midst of this pandemic, CBRE conducted 2 surveys, and there were several trends that we're going to talk about that were identified, but the respondents were really across industries. They were public, private, all different life cycles of companies.
Are we all frozen, or is it just Rhea?
I think it's I thought it was me.
Yeah.
No, it's skipping for me because everyone was so still.
Yeah. Not a problem. So really this survey I can pick up, and if she joins us, that's awesome. So this survey touched on many industries: public, private companies, domestic, global, and some of the key takeaways were that, while companies are still not back in the office, they're working to get there towards the future. So an interesting trend here is that many of these respondents in that survey are comfortable making long-term real estate decisions, even through the pandemic. These clients have a firm grasp on what they need to be successful going forward, and striking with an opportunity right now amid all of this uncertainty.
Thanks, Katie. And if I get kicked out again, I'll just dial back in. But the real key here to know is that we are dealing with a time where each and every market is reacting differently, okay? So in Philadelphia, for example, we're pretty comfortable that the market starts to come back in 22. So if you want to start planning and making some long-term strategies, now's the time, regardless of when your lease expires. You're a couple of years out, you can really
Rhea was so excited that she had full bandwidth.
Work with that.
Oh no. Do you want? I can shoot her a text and just let her know it's going now.
Well, all right, Katie, if you go ahead to the next slide, we can move on, and we can all commiserate about technological glitches in a few minutes. we get to the technology section. So, I think high level, the past year has certainly forced us to reevaluate what matters most about a great many things, but especially work. And we're no longer, I think, stuck in this antiquated mindset that it's about putting in your time 9 to 5, 5 days a week or more. We also know that it's not, this ivory tower work from home is going to solve everything. We're pretty I think we can all agree that everything in moderation is still great advice. And now that we've swung the pendulum to the two extremes, I think we're kind of finding a happy medium. But what I really think is exciting about this is that work has become more of a state of being and not necessarily a place, which gives us the opportunity to frame the office as a tool that can be deployed in order to accomplish a goal. So that might mean effectively connecting with clients, colleagues, or something else altogether. But again, as we all sit here in our digital silos, I think we all are hungry for in-person collaboration and recognize how necessary and desirable it is to really create that ecosystem of innovation at work. And I don't think any of us will soon forget how valuable face-to-face meetings can really be to help develop new ideas and just stay motivated and focused.
And I think, as we think about that post-pandemic world, where the office is somewhere where it's a destination and less so, a place where we're going to work, we're kind of thinking about thriving and not surviving. And how do we thrive in this new environment? I think, it's really a nod to Maslow's hierarchy of needs in this time period, where in the initial stages, we were meeting just our basic needs, right? Our food, our water, the scramble for toilet paper. But next is that safety and the needs to have a caring and safe environment for wherever we are. So carrying that over into, really thriving in our new environments. The next stage is meeting those social needs and having our employees feel really valued, and that self-actualization, where the office is creating a growth mindset. So Bridget, we'll kind of let you dive into this.
Sure. So I think I really enjoy this chart, and this is again data that we collected in those different surveys that Rija mentioned at the beginning. But you can really see the sea change in an attitude shift from pre-pandemic, with the vast majority of companies still moving forward with a one-to-one assigned seating methodology, to really people getting more nimble and agile and opening their minds to the more creative possibilities that unassigned seating can open up. And it doesn't have to be, the same unassigned policy for every single department or every single person. But if you have this culture that you're, again, deploying the office as a tool for conducting business rather than going to, reporting every day to complete a task, it really helps to open that up. And I know you might be thinking right now, like free address, has a bad rap and doesn't seem especially irrelevant in a pandemic. But I think, what we want to do today is really dispel that myth, because unassigned seating is really a strategic value proposition that can help position the physical office as a driver of value and efficiency. And, especially now when capital is at a premium, you really do want to increase the utilization of every precious square foot of space that you might be paying for in a given office, and making sure that every penny matters. I also will point out that, adopting a free address strategy, while you can take it to the extreme and do it all the way with all the bells and whistles and do a full renovation, but it also can be deployed as a stopgap solution, because it has so much to do with policy and planning. And this is a really big advantage. So you can kind of dip your toe in the water as you're kind of going through your return to work strategies at potentially reduced occupancy, and then bringing people back more and more and more. It's really one way that you can test and help manage expectations between the people who are coming back, to really help make them excited about coming back to the office and excited about this method of working moving forward.
Yeah, and I think we've established that most organizations are going to utilize that physical office going forward, and that, that fundamental purpose of the office is what's changing here. So I know, like us, you've probably seen some major announcements come out about some of these industry leaders, such as Google, taking advantage and really doubling down on their office. Google said that they're investing $7 billion in office space in data centers. So, every company is really on their own journey, and it's a wide spectrum. But ultimately, that concept of work being a place we go is shifting. And it's, we're not just going to our office to do something. Now we want to go and conduct business and have an environment that nurtures us while we do that. So when we think about that hierarchy of needs, it's a space that creates that sense of belonging and value and human connection that drives this innovation and collaboration for a lot of companies. So, looking back at, Bridget mentioning that free address, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what is free address. And, business leaders will say, well, that's never going to work for our industry or our culture, or you fill in the blank. But there's really different degrees of this. And I think, Bridget, you have some great insight into what those degrees are and how, it's really a fit for every company. It's not one size fits all.
Exactly. Right. So I think we know people like having options, as we've already talked about. And right here, we kind of have a range of different work mobility modes. So from, the pre-pandemic dedicated seat type environment that was so familiar to us, to, the hot desking or hoteling that was starting to really make its way in depending upon your corporate culture. Again, back to the work from home, and really it can be a blend and be deployed very differently throughout an organization, depending upon if it's a corporate headquarters that might have very discrete financial and marketing and sales departments, or a satellite office that has more creatives that are all together who are going to be, have different work styles, patterns, and all of that. So, we, just like we said before, kind of expect that somewhere in the middle is likely to be a good bet in terms of where you're going to average out in any given space. And again, so, it can help to dispel a lot of that trepidation that people tend to feel that Katie was talking about, that, oh, this will never work for us. Because you can do it incrementally, you can do it by department, or you can really go whole hog and take the opportunity to come back from COVID with a new approach towards work and how it's going to be a tool to kind of help you do your best on any given day.
Yeah, and I think when we think about Gen Z coming into this workforce, right, they're all kind of in their entry-level positions or just have graduated. And this generation is really, they grew up in a technically advanced upbringing where screens are at every point of your day, whether it's school, social, and, really just at every point. So thinking about when that translates to workspace is they're really independent in their work. So they're looking for those spaces that are private and independent for that work style, and they can be competitive with their peers, but they're also equally valuing that in-person communication. It's much more rare and really is important for this group of workers. So this necessitates incorporating those breakout rooms or collaborative areas, and also those shared amenities. I think this generation is growing up with Uber and with shared eating services and co-working. So any amenity base that is shared is going to be really appealing to this group of workers and could really be easily adapted by all generations.
And surprise, I'm back with some internet connectivity. So for this group, one of the other things that we want to talk about is the fact that co-working is completely conducive to what we're talking about, right? You can be at home, you can then go to your co-working space and either work in a private area, collaborate, sit in a cafe. I'm thinking of a number of different workout spaces. So if you're at an early stage and you're working from home or you're collaborating, this can work for you as well. And it's a great way to run your company. All right. So one of the other things that we want to talk about here is how else to make your workplace successful, and that's technology. So Bridget, can you just talk us through what some of the most important technology components are?
Yes, absolutely. Katie, could you go back just one page, please?
Oh, yes, you got it.
Thank you. So, Katie touched upon this, but, technology obviously is the secret sauce that really allows unassigned seating to be effective. And, a big takeaway, positive, if you want to call it a silver lining from the pandemic, is it's forced us all to get quite creative and figure out technology on the fly. So the demographic of the workforce kind of coming back into the office is much more digitally savvy than they may have been pre-pandemic, which is a really great opportunity for companies to thoughtfully partner with HR, IT, and AV to really think through the user experience and create something that's streamlined and really elevates the act of coming to work. Pre-pandemic, the number one thing I would say as a takeaway from any time I had a focus group with any group going into a new office is we just want the technology to work. Can we just open the door, push a button, and have it work, please? And I think, now more than ever, it's important to make good on that. And, we do have some time and we do have a little bit more savvy, all of us across the generations on how to make that work. So that's certainly, a very important benefit and amenity to think about as something to add to your palette of options to really help attract and retain that great talent.
Yeah, and these upgrades are money well spent because they're portable and kind of move throughout your business's lease cycle. So I think it's definitely a good investment and will really help in all of the other aspects of the firm.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into just mitigating large capital expenditures, especially in this season of uncertainty. So if you do want to take and do some free address and some activity-based work, there's a way to do that partially, as we've kind of talked about. Or if you're co-working, there's no CapEx, right? You don't need to write a check except for your operating expense or monthly rental and service budget. So this really tees us up for real estate as a service. Now we're going to try something really tacky and run a video while we're doing this. So we'll see how that works out.
So far, so good. Hopefully you can all see it. So when we think about some of this tech, we have this great tool called Spacer, which it kind of takes your goals, your objectives, some of your existing culture, and builds really a design and size that might be ideal for your firm. So that's kind of what you're seeing here is this great survey. It's super easy to use, and we'll give you that good planning stage, first stage ideas of what your space might look like.
Exactly. And I think, one of the points we wanted to drive home today is that, experience, resilience, and efficiency are really important ideas to keep top of mind. So we've touched on experience and really the amenitization of the office, the idea that, magnetizing the office as a destination of choice. If you want to say, creating a watering hole where all the big game come to drink, it's one way you can kind of think about it. But, really creating something valuable that makes people want to get up, get dressed, commute, and come into the office when you could just roll out of bed and go to your desk, as we've all been doing for so many months now. We've also talked about how technology solutions help empower agility, because without the technology, we wouldn't be able to have these great unassigned seating type plans. And again, the importance of technology as we are talking about coming back in a hybrid fashion where some people may be in the office and some might not, and really being able to connect people who may be in the office and maybe from home to still allow for those connections, collaborations, cross-pollinations, to continue to go through. And then Katie, go ahead to the next page, please. And again, we just wanted to touch on efficiency and utilization. So, this concept, right? Physical space with design moments and technology upgrades, you really have to take a hard look in the mirror and recognize that, embracing remote work is going to significantly reduce your space needs only if you do adopt a desk sharing strategy. So if you still remain assigned to a seat, you're still going to need the vast majority of your space. But we're not talking about packing a space with benching workstations. It's really important to recognize, I think that we all have, that everyone has different work patterns, preferences, and needs. And it's really important to create, again, a palette of choice to help create environments that support individual and collaborative work. So for example, if you think about this from the standpoint of a single workstation sitting there in the office, right? It's highly unlikely that pre, post pandemic, whenever, someone is going to sit in that chair all day. Somebody's, might be there in the morning, come in, grab a coffee, do a little bit of work, but they're probably in the office to, like we say, conduct business. So they probably have a team meeting where they might choose a huddle room to go into, to pop into for an hour. And then, maybe they go out for lunch with a friend or a client. And then, they have a few calls to take in the afternoon, so they choose a phone booth. So really, the highest and best use of that desk is not to sit there and be somebody's coat stand and bag rack, that they're only using for a few minutes in the day. You really should be able to be agile and move in and out and use the spaces that are there to help you support you do your best work. And, if your best work on any given day, given your schedule, can be accomplished from home, great. But, having the office again as a magnet that is a draw for people is going to be really critical part of continuing to grow and come up with creative and innovative ideas as we move into the future.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a great point for me. As we've been talking with a lot of our clients, at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of the conversations surrounded, are we going to go back to private office? But it's a bit of a contrarian view now. And I think that's what, Bridget, we want to go to next, is just what are the immediate benefits of adopting free address in these spaces?
Right, exactly. So, highest level, the biggest benefit is, being able to optimize your utilization or reducing your total occupancy or square footage. We've talked about how technology can enable that. And, the elephant in the room is obviously, why would we share surfaces if we're in the middle of a pandemic and we've just been told for so long to physically distance from each other? But that is because, part and parcel of a clean desk policy are a lot of things that actually are very beneficial towards office cleanliness and all of that. So if you think about it, if you have an unassigned desk, that means at the end of every day, it's clean desk policy. You don't have stacks of papers, personal belongings, things like that. Like you have a nice clean surface that can be wiped down. You can deploy different strategies from high tech to low tech to indicate when a room or a desk or a surface is clean or dirty. It can be as low tech as a piece of paper that's green and red, meaning clean and dirty, just to help give an indication to the cleaning staff that this area needs to be serviced. I think a concept that has picked up a lot of steam throughout the pandemic is the concept of sanitation theater. So again, putting on a display of visible cleaning happening throughout the day. So high touch surfaces being wiped down and just, demonstrating to people that their safety is top of mind and paramount. Even just signage saying we've deployed X, Y, and Z technologies to help improve the indoor air quality. Things like that, really do help bring that about. And I think additionally, having a more open environment that gives you kind of those different points to kind of bounce around to throughout the day are most likely going to result in an increase in natural air, light, and views to the space, which just kind of have those ephemeral benefits of being experiential benefits, I should say, of being in the space and really feeling more connected to the outdoors, and just you feel like you're in a much more comfortable scenario. Like Ria's hierarchy of needs definitely checks a few of those boxes. So again, it's all about being nimble, having a kit of parts to support people in doing their best work, and really being strategic and thoughtful about how your space is going to work best for you.
Fantastic. So I think we're going to take a pause here and see if we have any questions that have come up, or if anyone has anything to comment, because I think we have some industry friends on the call as well. So if they're seeing anything with their clients, I'd love to hear. No? Okay. We will keep going then. All right, so we're going to get into some fun stuff here, home stretch and a little bit of psychology. So this third section that we did was called A Day in the Life. So Sigmund Freud said that our attitudes are formed in the first 5 years of our lives. But research according to the Strauss and Howe generational theory indicates that an additional formative period occurs in early adulthood. So this is Gen Z right now. They're in their second formative period, entering the workplace en masse, doing so with 4 other generations, and it's all over computer screens. So let's go half full and talk about the future, like think post-vaccine, and how to make your workplace a magnet to maximize talent attraction and retention and create these collaborative and intuitive environments so that you are planning for the future.
Oops, muted. The good news that, that makes me feel a little bit better is I think it seems that we've moved past the days of the headlines heralding companies who are implementing forever remote policies. And it's become much more established, I think, in the media, through industry publications and everything, that this hybrid schedule seems like a pretty good thing and seems like it's here to stay. We've got some more stats from the many different surveys that we've done to just gauge sentiment, again, across industry, and really big numbers coming back that people do really miss their time in the workplace and certainly expect to have a place to go back to. Again, because the office is that irreplaceable catalyst for face-to-face connection that, despite screen sharing and all, as wonderful as it can and can't be, you can't duplicate that catalyst for face-to-face online.
Yeah, for sure. And the companies that we're working with that are most successful at planning their return to work strategies, they're starting with a survey to their employees. And when they ask their employees what can be improved or what they're missing most, it's not a real big surprise that what they're missing most is human interaction and boundaries, really, right? We've all lost boundaries as we've headed into this remote work experiment. So Katie, can you just talk to us about why in-person interaction is so critical for Gen Z right now?
Yeah, absolutely, Ria. So thinking about really your first few years in the workforce, it really sets the trajectory of your career. So this is when you're gaining new skills, you're solidifying your values, you're building those professional relationships, and growing your network. Harvard Business Review actually cites that networking is one of the most important aspects of your first job. It is proven to lead to more opportunities, increased knowledge, and faster advancement and authority within your career. So, thinking about networking, it's not just siloed into those coffee dates or, those forced kind of meetings in your company, but it's also just running into your employees in the office and that implicit knowledge transfer that happens when you're in a conversation with a fellow coworker or, overhearing a conversation even. So this is a place where your relationships are fostered into deeper connections and you form that sense of belonging with your fellow employees. So I think it's interesting for this group of workers to not have that in their initial set of initial years into the industry, and kind of seeing where there might be some cracks with technology not being able to replace some of those moments.
Yeah, I think what I like about this image here is the idea of casual collisions. And, it's, again, the Zoom and Slack just are very transactional in the end and very poor substitutes for face-to-face time. So for Katie and all of her Gen Z friends and those to come, it's a big sea change.
Yeah, and I appreciate Zoom and Teams and all the communication platforms and what they've done. But you see, I got knocked off earlier. So it's just going to be nice when that's one of our tools. And we can really get back and not have to worry about that and more worry just about mobility within our offices. So I want to talk about the workplace, how it allows for the casual collisions, the word that we're using here, but also satisfies just the different generations' ability to be productive. So Bridget, can you just talk to us a little bit about the integration of the groups?
Yes, absolutely. I think pre-pandemic, we all had a pretty good anecdotal understanding or stereotype, right? That boomers and Gen X tend to favor private offices, whereas millennials and Gen Z were the ones who were going to be more comfortable with an open workspace. But I think, again, silver lining of the pandemic is that the workforce now is much more active in thinking through what matters most at work and what's going to draw them back to the office. And these people are going to be much more intentional about how they use the office to be more productive. And I think that's the key. People are going to go to the office in all likelihood to conduct business. And they want amenities and a workspace and an environment and an experience that makes the day more comfortable, productive. And, it's, again, you're not schlepping into the office to complete a task. You're really there to conduct business, make those casual collisions, have those interactions, have those career building opportunities just by overhearing a conversation or bumping into someone or developing a friendship with someone in the office. That's the sort of thing you can't randomly Zoom bomb someone and say, hey, Katie, I've been meaning to catch up with you on this. I'm so glad I saw you. So it'll be nice to have those days back again.
Yeah, and I think understanding just the different desires of your workforce is really important when thinking about the future of the office. The easy route here is, okay, let's just go back to how it was. Let's, go to our desks and get coffee when we want coffee and go back to our desk. But now's the time to take this out of office time to think about what the future will look like. And, most of the forward thinking leaders are taking this time to plan and create a space that nurtures that future office space.
Yeah, and we're going through an acceleration right now of trends that were happening before this pandemic, and we're going to see everything fast forward. So we're going to start to see some really major technology. So Elon Musk, he has already embedded a brain chip in Gertrude the pig, and that startup Neuralink has applied to launch human trials. So we're just imagining the day that we have a chip in our brain and couple that with your Oculus contacts, and you can just walk into an office and assess every situation immediately to where you're going to work, where you're going to be most comfortable, and how you can get closer to the people that you need to work with for that day. And then another one that was really interesting is, we've been talking about autonomous vehicles for quite a while. That's being fast forwarded in a lot of the markets. We really think Philly's going to be one of the later markets, mostly because of the topo around the area. It's much easier to roll that out on the West Coast in some of the, not even the West Coast, but some of the flatter cities in the western part of the country. But talking about going from autonomous vehicles or cabs to flying cars, there's a German tech company, Lilium, who is building a vertiport in Lake Nona, which is outside next to really the Orlando International Airport. And that's planned by 2025. So we're really talking about now. So for now, our reality is that we have some AI embedded, there's some Internet of Things embedded in our daily lives, but there's a lot more coming in the future. So let's just start to talk about that a little bit, Katie.
Yeah, and I think, we know that autonomous vehicles and that shared service idea is the star of the commute in the future, and it's going to lead to that increased efficiency. But I think something that's really important to think about is just that shareability factor and the being able to kind of have these amenities that you're not only possessing, but you're sharing with, the community at large. I think when thinking about Gen Z, the student loan crisis that impacted millennial decision-making really is impacting still today how Gen Z is going to behave. And, combined with all this tech, it really is pushing that preference for a shared service and really that experiential living. People want to be able to build on these experiences and, they don't necessarily care as much about the materialistic possessions. So shared services, tech, that's more the future and less of just owning different, materialistic items. And Gen Z is really kind of focused on that type of thinking.
We should call you guys the on-demand generation, right? Everything, a little piece of everything right now. That's great. Bridget, we'll turn it over to you. Talk about competitive advantage here.
Yeah, exactly. So again, feel like I just am drumming the productivity drumbeat here. But again, whatever we can do to create this more productive workspace, and I've seen so many different app-based tools come out to really kind of become a competitive advantage for employers moving forward. If you say, all right, foosball tables, all of that kind of ephemeral thing to keep people in the office. I think that was kind of a corporate idea to like, how can we keep people in the office as much as possible rather than drawing them to be here because they want to. It's very much more this interactive technology that's taking center stage. And really this proliferation of app-based tools. So you can look at your calendar, say, should I go in today? Can I go in today? Who might I get to see if I go in today? And where can I go to be most productive? And really just, again, having this ability to push content to your employees, like, hey, there's going to be a really great pop-up food service provider in the office today, or we're going to have X, Y, and Z amenity, things like that to really just help people stay connected, as we bridge this digital and physical future.
Yeah, that's going to be really efficient. And then the other thing that's so interesting for business leaders, excuse me, is the idea that you can start to use IoT to identify when your workers are in and what types of space they're using and utilization rates, so that as you're planning, you get to develop an office that just rolls with you, right? It becomes more intuitive because of these technology tools and helps you determine really on the fly and at current times what you're going to need in the future. And that's all starting to roll out now. And that's not as much user focused, but it is business leader focused, and affects the bottom line. You want a space that draws people, and you want to give them what they're using and what they want, so that you can continue with the future and continuity of your company, and attract the kind of talent that you want.
Yeah, and I think having this tech forward workplace is super impactful on the newer generations of workers entering the workforce. I mean, they are the digital generation, and having this real-time data connected with your workplace is going to be natural of an integration. I think of the day when I sign onto my app, which I'm already beginning to do, to reserve an office. I have my light that flips on green or red, that I'm ready to talk. I can order my lunch. I can go get in my autonomous vehicle to commute on home, and all of it's just integrated throughout my day, and it's all just seamless. I think, but what's really important still, and I seem to harp on this a lot, is just that even though we have these great tools and this great technology, is in-person interaction can't be replaced by this, and it's really valuable. And I think looking at a lot of the research that's been done, that's a huge driver for a lot of Gen Z when thinking about the workplace, is learning from individuals who are in their company and being having that in-person interaction. It's still going to be really important, just as much as this digital integration will be. So when we think about these in-person interactions, we want these meaningful connections that are going to be impactful. And I think impact is a really key thought and key word for this group of employees. I think when we think about Gen Z and we think about what are their desires, and it's one of them is, what's the impact of our day-to-day actions? Whether it's, as consumers and investors, they're prioritizing environmental and socially conscious consumer behavior. And as workers, this translates to aligning with companies that, align with their personal values and align with where they want the world to be and what they want society to look like. So thinking about the impact of our physical space is not, just where am I going to work? It's also, how does this help nurture me and the world around me? I think, again, when we're thinking about our future office, it's beyond just the four walls. Companies need to align with their employee and with the physical environment that is, again, nurturing the well-being. That's not just the health of their employee, but also the environment. It's also social causes, and really holistic when we think about the future of that physical space and the physical being. So supporting, an employee in kind of all realms, whether it's value-based or well-being based, and making sure it's a space that nurtures that employee of all generations.
All right, well, if it's not the kids, it's the dogs. So I am, for one, I'm excited to get back to the office. But thank you guys all so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed some of our perspectives on the future of work. David, I see your question in the chat, and I think that we can address that here, and others, please feel free to chime in if you have any questions or want to talk through any of this content in further detail. But yeah, I mean, we agree very much that, the digital economy has been here in the background, but I think real estate's been traditionally a much slower adopter of a lot of these considerations. So, really taking advantage of all the capability and functionality that we've had at our fingertips for so long, and being able to deploy that into the future as we continue to, to look at the future of work. I think that again, silver lining of COVID is that we are really at a moment when I think that that's going to take off in an industry that's otherwise tends to be a little bit antiquated.
Yeah, and just to add to that, as we're talking to clients, they run the gamut. So some of the clients, we're really talking about forward facing. Other clients are saying to us, you know what, we're operating just fine and we're going to keep doing that. Everyone's going to have private offices. We're not real concerned because we're not seeking high growth and high tech talent. We're just trying to fill seats. And so we're good with the status quo. So it depends on where you are in your company and what type of company you have, if you retain and maintain that legacy versus move forward. And like anything else, there's going to be early adopters, and then there's going to be everyone else who sort of trickles into it. And I'm sure there's going to be some other trend we're talking about when the last of those legacy groups are just getting on board with this trend. So I think that's how we laugh about that one. Emily, what are your thoughts on the future of hybrid work? Some folks returning to the office while working with people who choose to stay remote. So I'll take that one first. Remote work is not going anywhere. I'd say 90% of our clients changed their remote work policies. There used to be a real drive towards you have to earn remote work. And now it's quite evident that remote work can be very productive, but productivity is not the same as efficiency and collaboration. So there has to be, it's going to be very difficult. And we've seen this experiment before where remote work, everyone's sent home to work. In some ways, it shows your employees that you trust them. Call centers who really need accountability, a lot of them are going fully remote because they have the technology to track their employees and make sure that they're hitting their goals. So there's an industry that I think we start to see a huge transformation, but there's going to be a ton of hybrid work. We have a portfolio office transformation calculator that's one of our tools, and it takes that into consideration because you can, of course, tell people when they're going to be remote. You can let people choose, and all of that affects how much space you need. Bridget, Katie, what do you have to add to that? Anything?
Yeah, no, I think the flexibility is key. And thinking about talent, if you're a great employee ready to, decide which company you're going to, and one company's offering you a couple of days remote and the other one is, fully in the office, it raises another question of, that I think it's going to be more widely adopted where it's almost like not an amenity, but kind of just a benefit of being an employee for certain companies where you're going to have more time to, be, whether it's at your home or, on the road and traveling, and it's going to be just another kind of aspect of that getting better talent and being able to provide that kind of perk for your employees and providing that flexibility.
And Emily, I don't know if you were meaning to touch on any of the actual execution portion of how are you going to be able to connect people kind of across that divide. And I think, certainly technology and the idea of, Zoom rooms and things like that, or even going back to whatever the new iteration of the half round table with the big screen. So you feel like you're all sitting around a table together, maybe in a little bit more of a relaxed, lounge type setting. Again, more of that hotel lobby amenity type space where you just feel like you're sitting around and really shooting ideas, brainstorming, coming up with things together. And again, offering the palette of choice. So maybe it is appropriate at sometimes to have a very formal conference room type setup that can accommodate different people calling in on screen and things like that. And maybe at other times it's appropriate to be a much more casual environment, or maybe you have a war room because you need a team to come together and just have a space where they can brainstorm and pin up and leave things. And you can have digital pin boards and physical pin boards. So everyone is able to participate in there, again, as we kind of feel out exactly how it's going to go with bringing people back into the office. So I think that there's a lot of different ways to do it. And again, offering that palette of choice instead of having, 3 choices: private office, workstation, conference room, is really going to help make that more effective moving forward.
Great. Do you have any other questions? Okay, I think we may be in good shape here. Thank you so much for everyone that joined. We get really excited about these topics and look forward to talking to everyone about it. So we appreciate the platform.
Thank you so much for your time today. And I love the presentation. I'm an executive for a high-rise superstructure firm, so I create space. So I was interested, I'm very grateful for the trends that you highlighted, whether or not I'll be creating spaces in the same way in the future. Nervous about losing my office towers, doing a lot of residential, but I'm grateful for the trends you highlighted. I'll take those into consideration.
Thanks so much.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining.
Do you have any research, the same questions that you all were asking, broken down by introverts and extroverts? Corporations tend to be geared towards extroverts, but introverts are actually the folks that produce the greatest innovations.
Yes, and so I don't know, we have to take a look to see what research we do have, but you say I'm a fellow introvert. And I know that when I go to our personal offices, yes. I'm gonna interrupt myself. There's a book called "Sorry I'm Late. I Didn't Want to Come." It just cracks me up. But anyway, when we go into our offices, which are very much activity-based, free address, I tend to go into the focus rooms as opposed to ever sitting out in public. Or oddly enough, I'll go into the cafe setting where not a lot of people sit so that I can just be by myself, but people can come talk to me. And then of course, the remote work for introverts is spectacular because you can really go heads down, get your stuff done, and then be in the office just to have the interactions you need to have, which saves my energy hugely.
Yeah.
So David, we will look to see if we have actual research on that. There are a lot of ways.
If you had it off the top of your head, I was interested. Don't worry, take it further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
you know the old adage that 20% of the workers do 80% of the work.
Yes.
The work that my firm does takes that even further. So
Okay.
It's very human centric that we're able to measure the actual labor productivity of an individual. And just select those people that are going to consistently hit home runs. And so we went into an organization and reduced the workforce by 87%, but grew the the performance of the group and improved the quality of the experience in, for each of the workers. And so, when you go and do that and you reduce 87% of the workforce, then you can start dealing with some of these urban issues that the big towers create, and start creating a much more human-centric urban setting again. It may not be great for your industry, but it could be great for humanity.
Yeah, but like we said at the beginning, it is what it is, right? This is happening. We need to be part of the solution. How did you take your workforce and give them an environment that was better for them? How did you do that? You're muted, David.
David, you're on mute.
By first acknowledging that management's existing tools are ineffective and obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
When management is granted its authority to govern based on improving labor productivity, but labor productivity growth has plummeted more than 70%. Okay, those tools don't work. And so what we went and did was use predictive analytics to be able to predict the performance of a person. And then that made it possible to better manage which butt goes in which seats, which is managing the neuroplasticity of the organization. So when we went and did that in one organization, we were able to reduce their labor costs of 122 million by more than 90 million.
Yeah. Wow.
And at the same time, improve the quality of the workplace and heighten worker engagement levels, have a sense of balance. I mean, a whole slew of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to focus on the experience. And Gen Zers want the experience more than anything, not how nice is the building. Mm-hmm. And okay, and so that was my comment earlier, not to, I was so impressed with your all's presentation, and with each of you, the three of you as presenters. I was taking notes for myself. Okay, but the content and the context of it, I really say there's a lot of, we're looking towards history, to the legacy rather than where we're going. And. Yeah. And I think that the buildings could be, buildings always determine functionality. Buildings determine experience. And nowhere did I really see that in the presentation.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I think a couple of things. One, just the conversation that we're having now shows that you are light years ahead of where most business leaders are in taking their business and relaying it back to real estate, right? Like that's a big challenge as you move forward into these future workplaces, because shifting perspective is very difficult. So I think that's one thing. And then the other one is, that's an interesting take on functionality of a building. Because I'm not sure that I 100% agree with that, only because we can take really basic real estate and create unbelievable environments once you get through those front doors. And that's where we've seen some huge success with clients, where you get the less expensive real estate, if you will, and then you spend the money on the interiors to get the technology and the finish levels and the interaction you're looking for. And that's a win. So they're not necessarily hamstrung by that functionality, but maybe I'm missing exactly what you mean.
No, I don't want to run the risk of taking the group hostage.
David, thanks so much for the interaction. That's great. Does anyone have